going to turn the time over to Matthew and Sherman, our speakers for today. They are a father-son team behind Refine Cybersecurity, or RCS. They are also recipients or participants of our NSBCI programming, which is really, really exciting. We're happy to expand our network and then bringing them to the fold of our workshop series. But Sherman and Matthew here are co-founders of Refine Cybersecurity. Sherman is the co-founder and chief technical officer, bringing over 30 years of IT experience from a national laboratory. His deep technical background ensures that RCS delivers secure, trusted solutions for organizations that they work with. And then Matthew is the co-founder and CEO, lending his background in business strategy and marketing with a passion for technology-driven solutions. Together, they lead this company dedicated to helping Native organizations and small businesses designed to protect themselves from evolving digital threats. We were just talking about all the different types of threats, and it's just like mind-blowing that this is just going to scratch that surface, which is a really great starting point, I think, for a lot of us. So Matthew and Sherman, please take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for that introduction, Raquel. So yeah, I mean, my name is Matthew Begay, and share the screen. Starting now?
Yeah. Okay. At the Nejo at the Hotisi, she Sherman Begay, she not kaiden, the Klane, Bashin, the Twitchini, the she, out of one the Chanel is to a carden, I said, a twit hado shada, a sneal kidats or was bigger. I said, thank you. My name is Sherman Begay, and just wanted to introduce ourselves. And also, first off, want to thank Change Labs for allowing us to be a part of this today. I am a certified ISO 27001 lead auditor. And so that's the biggest part of our business in what we do. You know, a big message and you know, what we want to convey today is we don't want to be fear-mongering. That's not our message today. Our message is about creating awareness and understanding how to do assessments and understanding, you know, the risk that you might have and how to mitigate those risks. And so a big part of our presentation will cover a lot of stuff that might seem obvious, but, you know, we want to, again, you know, get people thinking and talking. The end result is there's a lot of stuff to cover. And so that's just our quick intro.
Yeah, and just, you know, like my father said, it's all about creating awareness. You know, you never know for most businesses, they never know what they need until, you know, something happens, especially in cybersecurity. You know, say something happens and you say, oh, well, I had no idea. So that's part of what we're going to try to do today. So yeah, welcome everyone to our cybersecurity workshop. So a little bit about us. So my name is Matthew Begay. I'm his son. So I have a degree in marketing. So I have a background in marketing. And so I went to the University of Texas, and I'm also the Chief Executive Officer of Refine Cybersecurity.
You know, we did some intro, but in this slide, the biggest message that everybody should take away is cybersecurity is a continual improvement. It's an iterative process that has to be basically managed. And so again, you know, that's the sort of the what encompasses our business.
Yeah. So, you know, Refine Cybersecurity, it's just us two right now, and we want to start small, but, you know, grow our way up to bigger opportunities. So part of that is by helping small businesses. So stuff like specializing in risk management and ISMS assessments and helping businesses become compliant with the rules and the laws that govern, you know, that type of industry or that type of business. And so, yeah, and so as it says here on the last paragraph, you know, cybersecurity is a continual improvement. It's not a one and done, like make this change, make that, and you know, you're set. It's a constant refinement process of, you know, reworking and making changes. So yeah, that's a little bit about us. And here is today's agenda. And some key takeaways are going to be awareness of, you know, current cyber threats, best practices for just overall cyber hygiene, establishing a cybersecurity plan, creating an incident response plan, helping you protect devices and you know business devices and communications, data protection and backups, compliance and insurance, And then we'll finish with some free tools and some quick ways to help small businesses.
What is cybersecurity? There's a lot of sort of cringe phrases. The most secure computer is the computer that's, sort of like obvious, right? And so one thing to understand about cybersecurity is the risks that are associated. And so the risk pathway, what we're calling here is understanding, your process information. And by processing information, right, for it to be useful, you have to communicate it. And to communicate it, you have to have some form of connectivity. All right. So when you establish connectivity, therein lies your vulnerability, your risk of threats and vulnerability. And here's where the whole issue and concern of cybersecurity becomes a priority. And so cybersecurity in a nutshell is just a bunch of assessments and doing mitigations of risks that have been found, and then how does the information owner, how much risk are they willing to accept? That's really the bottom line. So, a huge part of cybersecurity is confidentiality. What that means is authorized access to information. And, from that, right, you have to have integrity. So integrity, right, again, in simple terms is understanding that your information is accurate, consistent, and it hasn't been changed by anybody or anything. And so, and then the last thing is making it available. And so as a consumer, as a person, as a business that creates information, you want to have your information available. And so those are sort of what is known as the CIA triad of cybersecurity. And so again, we're going to continue on this message that cybersecurity is a continual improvement process.
So how do we not end up in a situation like this guy on the right, stressed out and just very, he looks like he's very burdened, he's got a lot going on. And so that's exactly what, why cybersecurity matters is 60% of small businesses actually end up closing within 6 months of something like an attack, like a cyber attack, phishing, many other threats. And so once these small businesses are attacked and data is leaked, it's very hard to recover. Just a lot of damage has been done, and it's not impossible to recover, but it's pretty difficult. So cyber attacks don't just target people. Cyber attacks target people, not just technology. So 82% of breaches, involve human error. And that's exactly what social engineering is all about, is targeting human error, because computers it has a mind of its own, but humans, we're flawed, and we can make errors. And so that's what social engineering is all about. Phishing and credential theft are the most common entry points. And so awareness, just like what we're doing, awareness is your first line of defense. Every employee at an organization is, they have to have some sort of, IT, role, some sort of way to notice these threats. And so small actions, multi-factor. Yeah, so some common cyber threats. So we're gonna stick to the major ones. Phishing, which are, can look like emails or texts that trick people into clicking on links. Ransomware and malware. So ransomware is a software that locks or encrypts your data until the user or someone has to pay off something. Malware is just software designed to damage or spy on systems. It includes stuff like viruses, Trojans, and spyware and worms. And then social engineering, just what we talked about. It's like psychological manipulation. It's preying on human error, tricking people into granting access and letting go of some secrets. So here are some examples of real world breaches. So Barbara's company, the business email, it was compromised. A scammer impersonated her own assistant, just changing, took the same name but changed one letter in the name, kept everything else the same, and that human error, it looks similar. And so they got wired 380,000 to the attacker. So the lesson there is just verify payment request and train staff to spot these kind of emails. Look at every letter in the email. Does it look reliable? And then Imperium Health is a phishing attack. Employees clicked a fake login email. It exposed thousands of customer records containing health data. That lesson there is train your employees again to identify phishing and report these messages. And then we have St. Margaret's Health, the ransomware shutdown. This ransomware crippled billing systems, medical systems, and it led to the hospital to close permanently for, due to just not being able to recover. And the lesson there is, maintain offline backups and run incident response drills. And so you got to know who's attacking, who wants this information. So 65% of it is going to be cyber criminals who are profit-driven hackers, ransomware gangs, data theft rings. They all prey on these small businesses. And then 15% of that is going to be insider threats, employees, vendors, contractors misusing their access by accident or on purpose. And then nation state actors, people from foreign, people from other places around the world. They're conducting espionage and infrastructure disruption. And then hacktivists, right? Politically and socially motivated attackers aiming to disrupt things. And the last 5% is going to be the script kiddies, inexperienced individuals just using ready hacking tools that are out in the market that they just, they buy a subscription and then they use that, and just very amateur. So
okay, so with all that information shared, just a little bit of a background as to the kinds of threats, and the vulnerabilities that are targeted. A key thing and one of the key takeaways from today, we're hoping that small businesses, sole proprietors, even individuals, right, is creating a simple cybersecurity plan. We're in the business of generating large-scale cybersecurity plans that are very deeply involved. But again, looking at a small business, small, medium, a sole proprietor, or even for your own home as an individual, what are some of the things that you should have in place, right, that would identify assets and risk, right? And so, that's like the first step in understanding what should go into your cybersecurity plan. Know what you have, whether it's equipment, whether it's phones, but the more important one is data, information, right? What is it that needs to be protected? And so, and then along with that, understand the risk. So we'll get into that a little bit deeper. And so this is just sort of outlining what a cybersecurity plan, could consist of. As we continue to navigate this plan, right, there's understanding what it's going to take to secure devices, whether it's laptops, phones, and accounts, whether you have cloud accounts, Google Clouds, and so on. And so there's critical things to use, right? Just again, hygiene, understanding, you need stronger passwords, and Matthew will go into a little bit more detail in that. And MFA, if I could spend a few moments on that, MFA, multi-form authentication. Really, all that means is, do you have a secondary way of authenticating, whether it's a text that you get, an email that gives you a one-time code, or even better, Microsoft has a thing called YubiKey. Well, actually not Microsoft. There's a company that has YubiKey. So it's an actual device that can have a one-time synchronization that will allow this one-time access. And so that's really the definition, the core definition of what the multi-form authentication would be. Again, there's other things that need to be considered, and these are things that we're calling hygiene. And so we'll cover that a little bit more in depth, understanding that there's important data. So we're always going to come back and focus on data. What is that information that's important to you? So backing it up is a good way of protecting your information. When we get to that part, right, understand that backup is as simple as copying it to a secondary location. Just a simple drag and drop, as simple as that, but you have a backup. Managing access, understanding who should have access and who shouldn't have access. And the biggest takeaway from having a cybersecurity plan is documentation. So document this plan. And along with that, document who should have access and who shouldn't. And so making that clear is one of the critical ways of communicating that there are boundaries with this plan. So training and awareness, we will, convey that, as Matthew mentioned earlier, the workforce, the individuals, is truly the last line of defense in knowing how much security can be enabled and enforced. And so, but that can only happen with training and awareness. And so part of what we're trying to accomplish today is initiating, again, discussion, but also hopefully that discussion can lead into a business, whatever entity, to say, hey, you know what, we need training. Okay, how do you create that training? And so that's part of what we're trying to do today is, again, training and awareness. But in addition to that, there should be an incident response plan, and we'll cover that in a little bit more detail. But if a situation happens, if an incident happens, coincidentally, we've actually heard from true stories, even a couple today, matter of fact, where people have been compromised, very innocently, look real, look legit. So when that happens, what do you do? Right. And so having an incident response plan is critical, because in a moment when you're panicking and trying to figure out how much damage is going to happen or has happened, right, you need some plan to give you some clarity and some direction. And again, we're going to revisit this whole thing of cybersecurity, and your online safety is a continual improvement plan. And so it's not a one and done. We come back to it, we reassess. Business missions, business goals, people come and go in businesses, that's a change that needs to be assessed. And so with that, there's vulnerabilities. There's an ever-evolving vulnerability or ever-evolving exploits of vulnerabilities that create threats. And so in a nutshell, this is what it would take to generate a cybersecurity plan. And again, even at an individual level, for your own individual online computing with, whatever you have as a laptop, whether you have a phone, a tablet, something, right, is establishing some of these guidelines.
So how do you be hygienic in the world of cybersecurity? And that is through three ways: strengthen access, stay updated, and building awareness. So the way you strengthen access is, build passwords, unique passwords, 12 plus characters, different symbols, and never reuse old passwords. I know we're all guilty of making that one favorite pet we had growing up, that our password, and never change it. So you should get away from that and start making different passwords. And then enable multi-factor authentication on all accounts. Enable MFA everywhere. It just creates another layer. And then store these credentials in a secure password manager. And then to stay updated, turn on automatic updates for software apps and devices. Always keep them updated. And, those vulnerabilities will be patched and patched to prevent exploitation. Keep our antivirus and firewall rules current, and then build awareness. Conduct regular staff training on phishing and safe practices. Always encourage the reporting of suspicious emails, and then promote a security first culture. Everyone knows cyber safety, and everyone has been trained. So
something to add to this is it is very important to have unique passwords. So one of them, one tool to consider is a password manager. There's free ones. They're highly secure, and if you're just doing a search on a free password manager, you'll get some good results. But if you have a Mac, right, there's the built-in password manager. Windows has a built-in password manager. The iPhones, right, they all have a password manager. And the reason to bring that up is, yes, you should have unique passwords, but you're not going to remember every password. So maintaining all those passwords in a password manager is critical. Okay, so we're going to get into a little bit more details. We're truly skimming the surface in our presentation today, in our discussion today. We're highlighting some obvious stuff that should be considered. Again, the connectivity is where most vulnerabilities and threats are rooted in. And so for most homes, for most businesses, it's a Wi-Fi, it's a router, just like what we're using here. So out of the box, it comes with a password from the vendor, from whoever the supplier is. Have a practice of changing it, right? As obvious as it sounds, most people do not make that initial change. In addition to that, change your SSID. The SSID is what is viewable when you're searching for a router. A key thing to consider there is, don't give locations, right? Again, it's a combination of information that, a threat, right? Somebody that is an adversary, right, is going to try to piece together to say, oh, okay, I can use all this information, penetrate this Wi-Fi that has a default password, and I can probably get into cameras. I can probably get into, all the Internet of Things, right? Things that exist with that are attached to that. And so again, there's building blocks to why, it's rooted in like just changing your password, the default password that it comes in. Enabling strong encryption. There's a lot of good defaults, but again, that varies based on the kind of technology you have, the kind of router you have, the capabilities it has. But enabling a stronger encryption will help you, not bypass, but at least strengthen your protection against somebody that is maybe using some kind of illegal scanner, etc. And separating how you create a usable access point. So if you're a business or even at home, and you could create a family only, right? That's going to have a little bit more accessibility, but then you can also create a guest. A guest access could be very limited. You could maybe blacklist, whitelist. They can access, YouTube or something, right? And that's all they can do. And so you could separate and also do some monitoring.
So a lot of businesses actually end up using, their own personal device, or their own personal phone, their own personal laptop. So about 10 to 40% has been estimated, 10 to 40% of small businesses are estimated to use personal devices. And so every laptop, phone, tablet that is connected to the business, it can become a doorway for attackers if it's not secured the right way. So protecting these devices with strong tools, combined with good habits and constant maintenance, will ensure that your business operations will stay resilient against these attacks and these threats. And so always use trusted security software, require passwords and biometrics on all devices, enable encryption and remote wipe for lost hardware. So using stuff like BitLocker for Windows and FileVault for Mac. And then just keep software and apps updated. Just constantly, every time there's a new update out, make sure you update it as soon as you can, and then limit administration access and review activity regularly.
So one thing to note about enabling encryption tools like BitLocker, FileVault. So the main takeaway there is what it does is that it encrypts your entire hard drive. So what that means is if you lose it, or if it's stolen, whoever has it, they can't just open it, launch, and be on a working operating system. So what this does is basically the moment you turn it on, it's going to prompt for some kind of password, some authentication. And so that's important because once the OS is running, it's in a vulnerable state to be accessed. So if you can basically disable it before it even launches anything, then that gives you a little bit better protection. Okay, so moving along. So we've mentioned, so cybersecurity in general is a lot of point to point, but what we have to consider also is a couple of things. In Navajo, right? In Navajo, some people call computer base case, right? The metal that thinks. And they'll call a phone, in Navajo, they'll call it right? I mean, it's the whole descriptive meaning. So this is mobile. It goes with us everywhere, right? And so even our Navajo culture, right, understands that, hey, there's some attention that needs to be given to this, right? And so what we want to talk about here is, so being mobile, right, is a couple of things, right? It gives you a signature that basically describes where you go, what you do, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not, right? There's inherent things that just exist within our devices. So knowing your settings, we could go into this, and this could almost be a whole separate presentation about. We could go deep into an iPhone or an Android and go through the settings that create some vulnerability. A lot of it is peer-to-peer sharing. How do you manage that? How do you control it? So know your settings and always have a PIN, whether it's biometric, using a PIN, some form, right? Don't just have an unlocked phone, which is pretty obvious, but it can be done. As far as like surfing, going online, looking at different websites, using different tools, the encryption is an area that everybody should understand. So just having the awareness to say, okay, what website am I going to? Does it start with HTTPS:// something? Or does it start with HTTP:// and then whatever? So there's a huge difference there, right? The HTTPS is encrypted, the S meaning secure. So that's your preferred observation. Like observe it, okay, that is secure. Understand what site I'm going to. Is it legit? Okay, this is a safe form of browsing. If you notice, right, that I'm going to a website that is not secure, it's not, so the information I'm sending from my device to whatever Wi-Fi, whatever network access point, it's unencrypted. I using a tool, right? There's tool like Wireshark. Using a tool like Wireshark, I can see all that information going back and forth. I can find usernames, I can find passwords, but that's if you're using HTTP. If you're using HTTPS, there's a good chance I won't be able to get to it. And so just a quick description of, having that awareness. Let's see, again, we've touched on keeping apps and software up to date. That's important. One thing to note is know where that's coming from, know where those updates are coming from. If you're using an Apple, make sure it's coming from the Apple Store and so on. Limiting Wi-Fi. So this is an area that we can have a long conversation about, because a lot of it is just social habits. And social habits, we could pop into any place, really. Starbucks is an easy one, but like you could go to the doctor's office, and the doctor's office probably has a Wi-Fi, right? But understand that when you use public Wi-Fi, you introduce a lot of threats and risk, probably more risk than anything. So an obvious workaround is using a VPN. And again, a VPN is a tool that can give you an encrypted path to a VPN server. And so we would advise people to obtain a VPN. It could be a free one, may not be the best performing, but it's going to give you a little bit better protection, especially if you're stuck at an airport, right? And you've used up all your hotspot, right? And so now I got to use this public Wi-Fi. Okay, have some form of VPN, right? You use that VPN, have a little bit more connection. And again, a quick note, right, as we continue to move along, a quick note of why that is risky, again, is people can intercept the information that you're sending from your device, whether it's your laptop, phone, that connects to that Wi-Fi that many other people are attached to. And so that is the inherent risk of using a public Wi-Fi. And as we'll note in these upcoming slides, suspicious links, always be aware, always recognize, what am I receiving? And another note, limiting browser extensions. So AI is a great tool. It's an awesome tool. There's a lot of stuff that you could add to your browser. They're called extensions that enable some cool AI stuff, some other ways of browsing. But also what that does is it overreaches. It could change configurations within your browser, within your server, within your host. It could leak data. It could install malicious code. So again, know the source of where that browser extension is coming from. Have a little bit of background knowledge. Maybe do a little bit of research. Is this safe before you install it? And again, just taking that precaution will be worth it. Okay. To the next thing
On
here.
to the next.
We will take a break here in another 15 minutes or so to gather any kind of questions. But what we want to cover now, again, is data protection and doing backups. That is, again, it goes all the way back to one of the most critical assets of any user, right, is creating and consuming information. And so that is big business, right? So stuff like cookies, right? And it's all to gather what your habits are. What do you tend to do? What do you tend to like? So all that is information that's generated, right? So that's a collective thing. But then somebody like Change Labs here, they produce material, they produce stuff that's important, just like any business. So that's really an asset that needs to be protected. And again, without over explaining some of this stuff, just have a form of backup. And again, it could be a memory stick or a $20 USB device that you get, right? You can go to Walmart, you can get the Walmart brand. I love the Walmart brand. ONN on. It's cheap, it works, it does what it needs to do, right? So you plug that in, gives you a few hundred gigs or whatever, drag and drop, even if it's not fancy, but at least you have a backup copy. Or you could back up to a cloud if you use Google, right? Google Drive gives you about, I forget how much space it gives you, but it gives you some space. Again, back up your content, back up your data, back up the stuff that makes your information important to you. So that's the main point we want to make here is have some form of backup. Okay, so we've talked through how to create a cybersecurity plan. And again, just a high level, very basic, very simple. But then we also talked about all the factors that go into creating a cybersecurity plan, all the different components of it. And again, it comes all the way down to, what if I have a situation? What if I have an incident? Like, okay, what are my first steps? And one of the analogies that you could look at is, you basically just had a situation that happens, your heart drops. What have I compromised? What have I, what am I going to be facing with, and so on, right? And so in those kinds of moments, you need some form of a plan, some kind of a checklist, some kind of a method to say, okay, what's my first action? What do I do next? And so the key factor of an incident response plan, right? And it's really just a checklist. Your main goal is to minimize your disruption. If you're a business, I don't want to have to be offline for too long if I have to. You're protecting data. Okay, what's been taken, what's been compromised, what did I lose, right? And so along with that, you're reducing your overall loss, whether it's data, whether it's customers, whether it's reputation, right? You're preserving all of that. So again, that's the sort of the main goal of why we want to have an incident response plan. So the first thing you do, right, obviously, is identification, right? So you recognize there's suspicious things happening, right? And some of the conversations that we've had with folks, right, they've said, hey, we got this email that said, hey, we have this invoice and we're supposed to pay somebody, right? And it's a very common thing, right? But understanding, like, okay, start piecing it together. Does that make sense? So once a conclusion is made that, okay, there's a suspicious activity, okay, let's confirm this now. Okay, let's see who's been trying to access. And so, one of the things to take away from that is system logs. So system logs gives you a good indicator of what's going on, right? So your server, your desktop, whatever, they're generating logs, they're generating information. So that's a good place. And again, if we had a longer time, we could go through in detail what is it we're looking for. But confirming that unauthorized activity. And so once you've confirmed it, okay, what's the most immediate thing that I need to contain, right? So if you suspect my laptop has a virus on it now, okay, disconnect it from your Wi-Fi, disconnect it from, go onto your Wi-Fi and block that device, something, right? Just keep it from getting back onto the network, to the internet. Okay, now I'm going to go change passwords. What passwords? What has been affected? Okay, so now you start piecing things together. A situation could be my Google account got compromised. Okay, how do I go and change that? You go from another device, Google it. How do I reset if my account's been compromised? They'll give you step by step, but no, I have to change passwords. I have to react to this now. And unfortunately, if you're a business and you suspect you've been compromised, you're going to be impacted. Okay, I got to let my clients know. I got to let my customers know that I've got a situation here. So again, notification is going to go a long way for you than just sort of masking it and not doing anything about it. So notify clients to say, hey, we're aware of it, we're responding to it, we're mitigating that risk. And then as you have time, right, follow up, do some follow-up containment. Disable, again, if I have accounts that are compromised, how do I clean that up? Okay, I see where this IP, where this person came in from. I'm going to block it on my firewall, on my servers, on my Wi-Fi. So again, you're building a protection, you're building a layer, and then constantly keep your, affected customers, affected people, keeping them updated. Hey, we've made these mitigations, we've taken these steps, building confidence back. And once you do, the containment, okay, we're gonna clean this up now. What came in? Was it a malware? Was it a ransomware? Was it a virus? Was it some kind of a Trojan? Something. Okay, I've got tools, antivirus, your servers or your desktops, your Windows, your Macs, they all have tools to do virus scanning, malware scanning, and cleaning those, isolating it so that you can delete it. And so if you find out, hey, it's this software that I had that, basically created this vulnerability, but there's a patch for it. Okay, go install that patch. Make sure it's a reliable source for that patch. Fix that, right? Eradicate it. And once you've done your containment, you've done your cleanup, you've eradicated it. Okay, now we're going to go recover. So if I lost data or I've lost the integrity of this data now, okay, let's bring it back from backup, the copies that you had. Once you do that, you're sort of back in this operational condition now. Okay, let's monitor this now. Let's keep an eye on it. Let's make sure there's no additional unusual activity. Let's see. So again, logs are critical to understanding that. Once you see, okay, I'm functional again, it looks like things are fine. Okay, reestablish your connection to the network, to the internet, get it back into service. And then when that's all said and done, what's my lesson learned from this? Writing up a summary. And again, it's a continual improvement. All that goes back into your cybersecurity plan. Things that, that impacted you, affected you, we need to know. And so now it's in your cybersecurity plan. So it's this long iterative process.
So a lot of communication with businesses are done through email. So most breaches with these businesses actually begin with phishing. So here are some red flags to watch out for. Anything that's unexpected or urgent that demands, action right away. Red flags, spelling errors, phrasing, slightly altered domains, unexpected attachments, especially ones that are requesting payment, invoices or requesting a resume. And then the too good to be true offers, the ones you find in your spam folder of act now and get this amazing offer for free, stuff like that. Generic greetings, dear customer, emails claiming account suspension or payment failure, all red flags. And so, going based off that, here are some green flags that you can look out for. Is the sender's domain and display name, do they match and do they have an official source? The message and tone and design, do they all match the previous emails from this person that's been verified? No spelling errors, no grammatical mistakes, links that point to the correct secure sites, legitimate organizations almost never request passwords or sensitive data, via email. So look out for that. And then you can verify these requests through another form of communication, like phone or going in person, any other way that you can communicate.
So we're going to share this example. I mean, it's one of those that is very similar to probably what some folks have seen before. So you get this email, you look at the subject, right? Looks fine. Okay, I have an invoice that's overdue. Okay, and all right, looks like it's immediate. I got to look at it. So when you look through this, it looks fine. It looks legit. But again, as Matthew mentioned, there are some red flags, and so some obvious red flags are, again, looking at who's sending this, right? Does it make sense? Who's providing me this information, or where is this coming from, right? So if this raises a red flag, right, again, delete it, and we're going to share some resources later on that have a way of reporting stuff like this, right? If you see this, you can forward this to an actual government agency that can then dig deeper into this. But again, the key takeaway here is that I see this is not consistent, right? There's a lot of inconsistencies in this, and so I'm gonna count that as a red flag. And as you continue to go through this, right, and say, okay, another thing that should trigger is sort of a caution, right, is to say, why are they making this such an urgent thing, right? And they're telling you got to do this, and usually they'll tell you there's consequences, right? You got to and in this case, right, they're saying, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to suspend your account. So it creates, again, these are all artifacts of social engineering. If we continue to walk down through this, it's important, right? It's important to understand the source of the information that's coming to you, right? Does this look real? For me personally, I've gotten, so I use Apple, and I've gotten my Apple account basically sending me information, right, telling me I got to go make this payment. But then when I go look at it, hey, this doesn't make sense. So they're giving me a URL that doesn't make sense. And like we first had said a few slides ago, right, something to note, right, HTTP, hey, that's an unencrypted, unsecure address that they're giving me. So that, again, is, hey, that's an insecure website. And if I look at it, there's going to be probably misspelled words. There's probably going to be extra characters that shouldn't be there. And so once you start piecing this together, right, then you can say, yes, this is definitely an email that I should not respond to. I should not go to that website. I should not give it our payment information. I should not give it my personal information. And so at this point, right, delete it. Don't react to it. But if you choose to, you could send this and actually report it to even the FBI. FBI has a reporting channel to say, hey, you know what, there's these fraudulent activities that are going on. Again, add it into your incident response plan. So as we continue on in our presentation, this is an area that we really wanted to make it clear, right, that part of what we do as a business, what Refine Cybersecurity does, is truly make assessments according to key areas that a business should be in compliant with. So compliancy is a huge part of cybersecurity, if not foundational to cybersecurity, because there are laws, right, that govern how information is protected, whether it's state, federal. Along with that, additional legislative stuff like regulations can affect, your responsibility, can impact your level of responsibility. And there are also some standards. And like I mentioned, I'm ISO 27001 lead auditor certified. And so, we certify businesses to that international standard of 27001, which is very stringent. And so again, a business, if they choose to, right, that's a standard that they're going to comply to. And here's a simple one. A business could have policies, right, that it should abide by. It could be a code of conduct. It could be things of ethics, things that are, it may be even agreements. How do I use, if the company supplies equipment, laptops, whatever, there's an agreement. There's a waste, fraud, and abuse, right? This, it's going to be used safely and securely for the benefit of the business, right? And there's a policy that governs that. So all this means is, hey, there's a lot of rules to play by. And so, again, laws and regulations, they're important, especially if you're processing personal information, payment information, and again, stuff like HIPAA, FERPA, right, which is, it's educational, educational systems, right, and so on. So compliancy is a very important consideration when a business is, getting online, communicating, gathering information and processing information. And again, there's a liability that comes with it, right? If it's deemed that a business or an individual was not compliant, right, there's a liability. And so this, what we do is we make those assessments. We introduce the risk mitigations and how much of that risk is accepted. So even a small or sole proprietor has laws and regulations and standards and policies to comply to. So how do I achieve compliancy? And we're going to try to keep moving as fast as we can here. The big thing is understand your business activity. What information do I collect? How do I store that information? How do I process that information? You could ask yourself, hey, what business do I operate in? Is it regulated? Is it healthcare? Is it educational? Is it construction, right? So there's understanding those. And then even as simple as, do I accept credit card payments? Even if I use a Square, even if I have a third-party payment, right? There's still some guidelines. There's still some standards and policies that are associated. What are those? Is my business, or am I communicating, exchanging information with a specific state? Like, the information laws between states are very different. And obviously country to country, very different. And again, very strict on privacy laws. If we can emphasize that, what are those laws and which one may apply to me? So are there any federal laws? Are there any state laws that apply to me? Are there company policies or even other stakeholders? Do I have a customer that requires that I operate in a certain way, right? And now you have a binding thing, and now I have to meet that compliance. I have to be compliant with that requirement. So there's a lot of factors. Once you get to a point of auditing your data, right? You've gathered all this information, and you make your assessment. You look at your risk that could apply to you. And again, the simple question is, what data do I collect? Where do I store this? Who has access to this information? And then how do I protect this data, right? And so all that, drives your definition of, like, what do I need to be compliant with? And that's a huge part of what our business is. Our business is about helping clients know what it is that they need to be compliant with, and how do they get into compliancy. If they can't be compliant, if there's a finding, what are the mitigations and what risk can they accept, and so on, right? And that all is documented. And so that's what we do. And so that's how we achieve, again, the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So the next thing that we're going to try to wrap up with is liability. And so us as a tech-based company, we have to carry cyber liability insurance. As a business, you should have a business insurance, right, to protect you and your business. But if you process information, if you store information, if you collect information, there's a good chance you should probably consider cyber liability insurance. And again, whatever company you use, right, this is a discussion, something that can protect you, right, again, from things that might be, whether you're at risk for and didn't mitigate, but then now there's a situation and there's been information compromised. Stuff like cyber insurance can help step in, again, depending on what your policy says, but it's an area that we encourage people to be aware of. That yes, if you have a liability that deals with cyber, take a look into it. For us, as a cybersecurity, doing assessments, doing mitigations, doing proposals, doing all these things, we have to have an additional policy, which is errors and omissions. So errors and omissions for us, again, is as we work with clients, if we make a mistake or we leave something out, and that client is now has a situation and now they have some loss, now they have whatever, right? That is where that helps us be in a little bit more protected position. So just something that we want to put out there that is something that should be considered.
Yeah, and so we've compiled a list of trusted resources that us personally, we recommend anyone who runs a small business or anyone really, just check out these free resources. Cybersecurity Information Security Agency, the FTC, Cybersecurity for Small Businesses, the US SBA, Strengthen Your Cybersecurity, and even the Federal Communications Commission, Cybersecurity for Small Businesses.
Yeah, so some other ones, the FBI has a really good resource. So the top one there, CISA, is a good resource. I think that's something that we recommend people to regularly visit, understand, the new evolving, I guess, threats that exist out there and what kind of ways to navigate that, right? And so FBI, there was another one that was off the top of my head, but there's these resources, and we definitely recommend that people continue to leverage those. And if there's additional Christians beyond that, right, we're a resource. So
some key takeaways from this jam-packed workshop that we just had is, number one, cybersecurity is a business essential. And it begins with those cyber hygiene essentials that we touched on earlier. And number two, understand your legal and compliance responsibilities. Even if you think your business may not have to adhere to those, chances are there probably are some sort of compliancy that you need to be aware of. And then number three, know what applies to your business. Again, like if you think, oh, that this doesn't apply to my business because we do this, but chances are it might. So always know what applies. Number four, safe online presence and practice. Just be secure whenever you're online and going through websites. And then lastly, number five, training and creating awareness. These are essential to recognizing and responding to the threats that are ever changing and all the threats that are out there that face your business.
And our last slide.
Yeah, that's the last slide. So if anyone in the chat, really, if anyone has any, question that they want to, discuss later, you can email us at info@refinecyber if you have any questions about anything that we just went over. And then here are our personal emails if you want to get in touch with either one of us. He's Sherman Begay at Refine Cyber, Matthew Begay at Refine Cyber, and then a QR code to our website to just browse through and maybe check out. And so any questions, you just email them to one of these emails.
Okay, we have a quick question. I think we have some time. A lot of our small business entrepreneurs use platforms like Square. What do you recommend are good practices to ensure that their customers' information is safe? So again, the added benefit of using a third party like Square, right, is that they're already compliant, right? So they, as a service provider, Square is compliant. But the responsibility of a small business or a sole proprietor, right, is to understand and record, like for your own records, when did this transaction happen, right? So if you already have a form of receipts, but if you're selling a product, if you're selling a service, and somebody uses, you use Square to make a payment, right? The majority of the responsibility lies within Square, but just have a record of it. Have a record on this day at this time, we made this transaction, right, for this amount. And that is a good practice. That's a good practice because, again, as we said, Square has already accomplished a lot of their own compliancy of how they're managing it. You're not managing and storing the data. Square is receiving and processing and maybe even storing that information. So they're worrying about their own compliancy. So you as the individual, as the business, yes, just understand and record when did this transaction happen. And so that is probably the best practice that you have. And again, to add on to that a little bit, if your business is based on, some kind of a cloud-based architecture. So, Google, if you have a Google workspace, if you have some kind of a CRM, right, that is already within a cloud or a software as a service, those have already been meant to be compliant, but you should still have an assessment of, again, the configurations that you have within those services, meaning that you don't have to reach some kind of compliancy. Google's already done it. They will provide you documentation that says we meet these laws, these kinds of standards, these kind of policies, that we do those things. And so that's something to take away. Let's see, what's a piece of advice you'd give to entrepreneurs who want to make cybersecurity part of their business plan from the beginning? I think taking the sort of simple outline that we shared as part of a cybersecurity plan, again, just using that as a baseline and documenting it and making sure that there's a version control. Save that document, whether it's within your cloud, whether it's within some kind of local archive that you have, but make sure it's a version control. So if you're using Word, make sure there's a version control enabled so that any changes that are made, it's recorded, right? So there's a record of the changes that are made within that plan. And so that's probably going to be the best way for, again, a business that's starting out and wanting to have a cybersecurity awareness, is integrate that plan that we had just outlined. It might seem simple, but you will find that as again, as a continual improvement process, that plan will grow. You will find needs that you didn't know you had. You will say, oh, I communicate this information with so-and-so. Oh, I communicate with so-and-so. And so your plan is going to continue to grow and mature. So just using that, base cybersecurity plan that we outlined would be a good start. I think that's it. Just to wrap up, we do want to offer our I guess our business as a resource. If a small business really has no other way no other place to turn, like, hey, run it by us. Maybe we'll point you in the right direction, send you to the right folks. Maybe it's a quick answer, but don't make any assumptions, right? If we can't get you the answer, we'll find somebody that can help answer.
And we do have our services listed on the website, but if you need something more tailored towards what you need or what your business needs, that's something we can work with, and we can modify anything that needs changing. But yeah, we're willing to work with anyone out there. So
okay,
I think that's it.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Matthew and Sherman.